Video opens with a wide shot of a stormy, ink-black sea. Rain lashes down, and a low, menacing thunder rumbles in the distance. The camera pans across the churning waves, revealing the silhouette of a massive, foreboding ship. The sound of creaking wood and snapping sails fills the air. They say the devil himself sailed the seas, that he wasn't a myth or a ghost, but a man of flesh and bone. A man who forged his legend not with a pen, but with a pistol and a cutlass. His name was whispered in every tavern and marketplace from the Caribbean to the colonies, a name that could turn a sailor's blood to ice. Blackbeard. But before the legend, before the terror, there was a man named Edward Thatch. No one knows for certain where he came from. Some say Bristol, England, others claim Jamaica. What we do know is that he started his life in a time of brutal war, the War of the Spanish Succession. Like many young men, he found himself on a privateer ship, a legal pirate given a license by the crown to harass enemy vessels. For years, he honed his craft, learning to navigate treacherous waters, master naval combat, and strike fear into the hearts of his enemies. He was a natural, a man who moved with a silent, deadly purpose. When the war ended in 1713, a strange kind of peace settled over the oceans. The privateers, who had known nothing but the thrill of the chase and the plunder of battle, were suddenly unemployed. But Thatch and men like him weren't built for a quiet life. They looked at the endless blue horizon and saw not peace, but opportunity. They turned their backs on the king and embraced the black flag. Edward Thatch joined forces with Captain Benjamin Hornigold, a man who would become his mentor in the dark arts of piracy. Hornigold was a veteran of the seas, and he saw something special in Thatch, a ruthless cunning and natural command. Under Hornigold, Thatch began to make a name for himself. He was part of raids on merchant ships, his reputation growing with every successful capture. He wasn't just a brute. He was intelligent, a tactician who understood the psychology of terror. He knew that the greatest weapon a pirate had wasn't a cannon, but a reputation. It wasn't long before Thatch had his own command. He seized a massive French slave ship, the Concorde, and transformed it into his flagship. He renamed her the Queen Anne's Revenge, a name that echoed with defiance and a bloody promise. But the ship was only the stage. Thatch needed a persona, a symbol that would strike fear deep into the heart of anyone who saw it. And so, Edward Thatch vanished, and Blackbeard was born. He was a sight to behold, a towering figure, over 6 feet tall, with a wild, jet-black beard that covered most of his face. Before a battle, he would twist his beard into long, menacing braids and light, slow-burning fuses and place them under his hat. The smoke would wreathe his face, giving him the appearance of a demon emerging from the very depths of hell. Imagine it, a massive pirate ship, its black sails silhouetted against the setting sun, and standing at the helm is a man with a smoky, demonic halo around his head. It was a spectacle of fear, a psychological attack before the first shot was even fired. Blackbeard's legend grew with every captured vessel. He wasn't known for his cruelty, but for his sheer audacity. He rarely harmed his captives, preferring to use his terrifying reputation to force surrender without a fight. His flag, a horned skeleton holding an hourglass and a spear pointed at a bleeding heart, became a symbol of his power. It was a clear message: your time is running out. He operated in the waters of the American colonies and the Caribbean, a master of the seas, an untouchable ghost. He amassed a fleet of ships and a small army of loyal followers. He was more than a pirate. He was a king, ruling over a small, brutal empire of plunder and lawlessness. He would raid a ship, take what he wanted, and then let the crew go, sending them back to port with tales of his terrifying visage and the smoke that poured from his face. They were his unwitting publicists, spreading his legend for him. He was a king without a kingdom, a man without a country, living by his own rules in a world that sought to shackle him. But as his legend grew, so did the price on his head. The governors of the colonies, particularly the governor of Virginia, were desperate to stop him. The King of England himself wanted Blackbeard's head on a pike. The hunt was on, and the walls were beginning to close in. But Blackbeard, the great theatrical pirate, wasn't a man to be caught easily. He had one final, bloody act to perform. A show for the ages. And what a show it would be. Sound of waves lapping against a ship's hull. A low, tense melody plays in the background. The camera pans across the ornate, dark-wood interior of the Queen Anne's Revenge. Sunlight streams through portholes, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Life on the high seas wasn't all plundered gold and glorious battles. It was a constant grind of cramped quarters, rotten food, and the ever-present threat of disease. Yet for Blackbeard and his crew, it was a life of ultimate freedom, a defiance of the very laws that govern the world on land. They lived by a code, a brutal, unwritten set of rules that bound them together. Disobey, and you might find yourself marooned on a deserted island, left to the mercy of the elements. Steal from a shipmate, and you might face a bullet to the chest. It was a democracy of outlaws, where the captain was elected and every man had a say in the distribution of treasure. Blackbeard, however, was no ordinary pirate captain. He was a master showman. He understood the power of spectacle, using it not just to terrify his enemies, but to control his own men. He would sometimes pull out his pistols and fire them wildly into the air, or even at his own crew, just to remind them who was in charge. It was a dangerous game, but it worked. His men feared him, but they also respected him, and more importantly, they were loyal to him. After all, he was the one who brought them unimaginable wealth. Their biggest score came in the spring of 1718. Blackbeard, with his fleet of 4 ships and a force of over 300 men, launched an audacious blockade of the port of Charleston, South Carolina. He essentially held the entire colony hostage. The governor and the panicked citizens watched from the shore as Blackbeard's ships, bristling with cannons, sat just outside the harbor. For a week, no ships could enter or leave. The economy of the colony ground to a halt. The pirates took several ships, but Blackbeard wasn't after gold this time. He was after something far more valuable: medicine. He needed a chest of supplies to treat his men, and he demanded it in exchange for the lives of the hostages he had taken. The governor, with no navy to speak of, had no choice but to comply. A chest of medicine was sent out, and Blackbeard, true to his word, released the hostages. But he also took their valuables before letting them go. It was a perfect display of his power, a bloodless victory that showed the world he was not just a brute, but a calculating strategist. He had brought an entire colony to its knees. But with great power comes great scrutiny. The blockade of Charleston was the final straw for the authorities. The governors of the colonies, tired of Blackbeard's reign of terror, were putting together a plan to take him down. Blackbeard, being a man of cunning, knew his time was running out. He knew the golden age of piracy was drawing to a close, and the noose of the Royal Navy was getting tighter. He decided it was time to change the game. He sailed to Bath, North Carolina, and with a brilliant, and some might say treacherous, move, he surrendered to Governor Charles Eden, accepting the king's pardon. But a pirate's life is a hard one to leave behind. Did Blackbeard truly want to retire to a life of peace and quiet? Or was this just another one of his clever tricks? He kept his largest ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, and his men were still by his side. It was a flimsy peace, a tense quiet before the storm. People whispered that he was just biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. But one man refused to believe in Blackbeard's reform. That man was Governor Alexander Spotswood of Virginia. He was convinced that Blackbeard was still a menace, and he was determined to end the pirates' reign once and for all. Spotswood would not wait for Blackbeard to break the law again. He took matters into his own hands, commissioning 2 sloops and sending a small force of men, led by a young and ambitious naval officer named Lieutenant Robert Maynard. Their mission was simple: find Blackbeard and bring him to justice, dead or alive. Little did Maynard know that he was sailing straight into one of the most brutal and legendary battles in the history of piracy. A haunting, slow drum beat begins to play. The camera cuts to a tight shot of a weathered map, an X marked on a small inlet in North Carolina. The sound of waves crashing and gulls crying swells, creating a sense of foreboding. The year is 1718. The month, November. Lieutenant Robert Maynard, a man of quiet determination and fierce loyalty to the crown, sails his two small sloops into the dark, tranquil waters of Ocracoke Inlet, North Carolina. His target is the legendary Blackbeard. Maynard knows that his small force is outmatched in firepower, but he has the element of surprise. He hopes to catch the Pirate King and his men unawares, sleeping off a night of rum and plunder. But Blackbeard was not a man to be caught sleeping. On the morning of November 22nd, Maynard's sloops spotted Blackbeard's ship, the Adventure, and a small band of pirates anchored just inside the inlet. Blackbeard, with his usual bravado, was entertaining a guest from a nearby plantation. When he saw the two sloops approaching, he was not afraid. He was defiant. He cut his guest loose, preparing for what he believed would be an easy fight against what he assumed were just more merchant ships. He was wrong. Maynard's lead sloop ran aground, but his second ship, the Ranger, managed to get close enough to open fire. Blackbeard returned the favor with a full broadside. The sheer force of the pirates' cannons was devastating. Maynard's crew was decimated, and the young lieutenant was left with only a handful of men. It seemed like Blackbeard would win in a single brutal volley. But Maynard, a cunning officer, had a trick up his sleeve. He ordered his men below deck, making it look like his ship had been completely wiped out. Blackbeard, ever the showman, fell for the ruse. Seeing the seemingly empty ship, he ordered his men to board, believing the fight was over and the prize was theirs for the taking. He himself led the charge. The moment his men hit the deck, Maynard's hidden crew emerged, launching a furious and desperate counterattack. Swords clashed, pistols fired at close range, and the air filled with the cries of men fighting for their lives. It was not a battle of tactics or strategy, but a bloody, up-close melee, a brawl for survival. And at the center of it all was Blackbeard. He fought like the devil he was said to be, a massive figure with 6 pistols strapped across his chest. He blazed a path of destruction. He took a hit from a pistol in his shoulder, but he kept fighting a force of nature. He was a terrifying sight, his beard smoldering, his eyes burning with rage. He had one goal: find Maynard and kill him. He lunged for the young lieutenant, their blades meeting in a shower of sparks. Maynard's sword broke, but in a moment of quick thinking, he managed to fire his pistol at Blackbeard. The shot struck the Pirate King, but it wasn't enough. Blackbeard staggered, but he kept coming. It wasn't until a Scottish crewman from Maynard's ship, seeing his commander in peril, drew his own blade and slashed Blackbeard across the neck. The wound was mortal. The great pirate, who had defied kings and terrorized an ocean, finally fell. The battle was over. The Pirate King was dead. Maynard, as a final act of victory and a warning to all who dared follow in Blackbeard's footsteps, severed the pirate's head and hung it from the bowsprit of his ship. The body, riddled with an astonishing 25 cuts and 5 gunshot wounds, was thrown overboard. It said that as Blackbeard's body hit the water, it swam 3 times around the ship before sinking into the depths, as if the pirate's spirit refused to accept its final defeat. The legacy of Blackbeard is a complex one. He was a villain, a thief, and a killer. But he was also a symbol of rebellion and freedom, a man who refused to be bound by the rules of society. His death marked the beginning of the end for the golden age of piracy. The authorities, emboldened by their victory, cracked down on the remaining pirates, and the black flag slowly faded from the seas. But Blackbeard's legend, like the swirling mists of the sea, would never truly disappear. He became the stuff of myth and legend, his story told and retold in every port, his name echoing in the whispers of sailors and the pages of history books. A dark ghost of the seas, a pirate king who died as he lived, in a final, bloody stand that would be remembered for centuries to come. Video fades to black with a final low, slow drum beat. If you want to dive deeper into the dark corners of history, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story.